It's a story we've heard before. A deal may be within reach to open the Strait of Hormuz, the key shipping channel between Iran and Oman that handles a huge chunk of the world's oil, gas, and fertilizer. Now, since the conflict between the United States and Iran began, Tehran has used its grip on the strait to drive up the price of fuel and food around the world. And so far, we've seen little progress on securing a lasting deal. Now, with U.S. President Trump again saying that an agreement is just around the corner, we want to know, is this time really any different? Iran has indicated that it has reached an agreement with Oman on a shipping route through the strait. What's not known is how the U.S. will react. President Trump has urged the reopening of the passage, but rejects any deal that would leave Iran in control of trade routes. So let's take a listen to what Iran's foreign minister had to say about negotiations with Oman.
I can say that the latest situation is that almost all of the topics are under discussion. The map, the transit routes, the entering and exiting of maritime traffic, and those bilateral side agreements with Oman. Because it's not just a map. These fundamental agreements with Oman have mostly been completed, meaning we have made significant progress in our discussions with Oman. And this progress is on the verge of being finalized.
I'm joined now by Elizabeth Barras, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council Center for Strategy and Security in London. Elizabeth, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So we seem to have a deal. What actually are we waiting for now?
Well, we have one deal Well, we think we have one deal, or one deal is about to be finalized, which is the agreement between Iran and Oman about governance of the Strait of Hormuz. And I think it's important to remember that the Strait of Hormuz, before the war, was governed by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, just like other straits in the world. And UNCLOS stipulates that every ship gets to transit every strait, just like it gets to transit every ocean, without any impediments. And the war in Iran clearly changed that. And so what we are hoping Iran and Oman are about to present soon is an agreement that would allow shipping to resume at some sort of normal levels. What we don't know is what requirements Iran and Oman are going to put, if any, on the ships transiting through. But it's not going to be as easy to get through as it was under UNCLOS before the war.
So if I understand you correctly, we may have a deal, but we don't know who exactly will control the strait or where exactly that leaves the question of tolls, correct?
That is correct. So what we know so far is that Iran and Oman are negotiating an arrangement that would see one shipping lane on the Iranian side, one on the Omani side. One would handle inbound traffic into the Persian Gulf, one would handle outbound traffic. So far, so good. And then at some point, the central shipping lane, which used to be the one that all the ships used before the war, may return to operations. The problem with that lane is that it may be mined. In fact, Iran says it is mined, so those mines would have to be removed by somebody. But what we don't know, you mentioned tolls, what we don't know is what sort of compensation Iran and Oman are going to expect from the ships wanting to transit, either going into the Persian Gulf or out of it. Under UNCLOS, you sail free of charge. You don't pay any coastal state any fee for the right to transit through their waters. But in this case, Iran and Oman clearly have the opportunity to charge a bit of money because the world needs the Strait of Hormuz to reopen again. They may not call it tolls, but they may still ask for some money. In fact, news just came in that Iran has floated the idea of a 5 to 7% fee on ships measured in the value of their cargo. So this is it seems like good news that the Strait of Hormuz may be about to reopen, but compared to again the world before the 28th of February, it is not as good as it was then.
All right. Now, we have been here to a certain extent before. We've been hearing about possible deals on and off for the last several months. What is actually new about this round of negotiations?
So the first thing to remember is that this round of negotiations is between Iran and Oman. Then there may or may not be a different round of negotiations between the United States and Iran. President Trump has said that the Americans are negotiating with Iran, whereas the Iranians say that no such negotiations are taking place. But negotiations are definitely taking place between Iran and Oman. And what's interesting about that is that they seem to have found some sort of agreement or common ground on which to figure out the details of how to administer the Strait of Hormuz if it's not going to be the UNCLOS arrangement that existed before the war. And we should remember that Oman has been affected by this war. So these are not exactly best friends, but they've clearly come together to try to find some sort of way of opening the strait to more traffic.
All right. Where does this actually leave the United States? I mean, if there is this prospect of tolls, do you think that the United States and Washington will be willing to accept that? That seemed to have been a red line for the White House in the past.
It has been a red line for the White House in the past, and Marco Rubio has said, the Secretary of State has said in recent days, that there mustn't be any tolls. But then again, the midterms are coming up and the war is still going on, the war with Iran. And President Trump is clearly eager to wrap up the war. I remember at the beginning of the war, there was talk about it's going to be another 2 weeks, another 4 weeks, another 6 weeks. Well, now we are into several months of war, and President Trump is very eager to wrap this up. So I think one likely outcome is that Iran and Oman will agree on transit through the Strait of Hormuz, charge some sort of fees, call them something like administration fees, facilitation fees, even environmental fees, something like that. They won't call them tolls. I think that's unlikely. And then the Americans will be able to accept that arrangement. Still, it wouldn't look particularly good for the United States, considering that that would be accepting an outcome that puts the world in a worse situation than it was before the war, and the stated objective of the war, namely the disarmament of Iran and the replacement of the regime. That is obviously a very long way away from having happened.
All right. And where does this leave other Gulf states and maybe other international parties who want to use the strait? Do you think they will be able to accept a deal that sees some type of fees being paid on Tehran?
Well, they're not going to be pleased, and the Gulf states have already voiced objections to fees of some kind, whatever they are called, in the Strait of Hormuz. But at the end of the day, they especially the Gulf states, are in desperate need of this strait. They have to use it not just to export, but also to import cargo. So I think even though they are very unhappy about ships having to pay fees, and we should remember it's ships that would have to pay the fees, not countries. Even though they are unhappy about such fees, and other countries are unhappy about such fees, they may conclude that it's the best possible outcome out of many bad outcomes. Then it's also important to remember that the paying of the fees puts shipping companies in a very difficult situation, because Iran is still under international sanctions. If you pay the Iranian government, you may violate international sanctions. Well, how is that going to work? So all of that is part of this very complex and detailed conversation that appears to be happening at the moment between Iran and Oman, with interventions from other countries.
Now, that kind of leads me directly to my next question. I mean, could this deal just all fall apart? It's a complicated series of negotiations, and we've seen deals to end this conflict fall apart time and time again. Could we be facing a similar situation with the current negotiations?
We could. No agreement is complete until it has been signed. And as we know, even agreements that have been signed often or sometimes fall apart. So we live in complete uncertainty at the moment, and nobody more so than ship owners and importers and exporters, because they are the ones who will have to make the decision about whether to go through the Strait of Hormuz or not. That includes, of course, the ships that are still trapped in the Persian Gulf, but also the ships that may want to resume trading with the Gulf states, so go in to the Persian Gulf. They are the ones that will have to decide, is this worth the potential fee, but also the risk. And once you go into the Persian Gulf under whatever agreement is signed, if one is signed, once you go into the Persian Gulf, you then have to you have to consider the risk that the agreement may fall apart while your ship is inside the Strait of Hormuz. So these are the massive dilemmas that ship owners and everybody using ships face at the moment. But still, the prospect of an agreement is better than the prospect of no agreement.
Well, sure. The uncertainty has been keeping us all on hot coals. That was Elizabeth Braw from the Atlantic Council. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.